So I'd love to start with just a show of hands. If you have ever personally felt like you were directly discriminated against for your gender, for being in or seeking leadership. All right, so these are the barriers we're going to be talking about today, but we're also going to be talking about what we all can do to change it. And just a funny little note, I was tickled when I was approached about this panel because some of the language included Gen Z and young people, and I am very much a geriatric millennial. I always have to have apps and memes explained to me. I was days late to Demure and Mindful, so I will do my best to represent the youth, but I care very deeply about diversity in leadership, whether that be gender or race or age or anything else, so it's such an honor to be here. And with these remarkable ladies. Oh. So I think we're going to start, we were actually just told to start with our journeys and sort of our career paths, how we got here, if we learned anything along the way. As I said, I am the founding director of Paid Leave for All. We're the national campaign of the organizations that are all fighting for federal paid family and medical leave. But I've been working in gender justice throughout my career. And I've kind of worked at it from every angle. I'd like to say that was strategic, but mostly I just stumbled upon it. Everything from the private sector to philanthropy to academia to advocacy at the grassroots and the grass tops. I've been lucky to kind of done all of that. So I started early in my career. I was doing political communications in the 2004 cycle. I also worked a bit, as I said, in the private sector because I wanted to learn about how you sell a product or an idea from the very best. And unfortunately, a lot of them are in the big corporate space. So then I wanted to work in philanthropy. So I was at the Barbara Lee Family Foundation and political office for a number of years, where both working as a foundation and also directly with women's campaigns. So everything from city council to what we'd hoped was the Oval Office. I also wanted to get an academic grounding, so I went to the London School of Economics. I studied gender and social policy, and I wrote my dissertation on the impact of women in leadership. And I looked at countries with the highest levels of women in national government to see if it made a difference. And you can probably guess the Cliff Notes, it does. And then did a number of different sort of nonprofit jobs. I worked abroad because I wanted a global perspective. I am part Armenian and Arab. So I worked in Armenia with women in politics, which was also very important to my understanding of domestic politics. I was at People for the American Way, training young people and women who were in office to run for higher office. I helped with the launch of Supermajority. And then I was so lucky to have the job, 2016 I was working at Planned Parenthood with the Hillary Clinton campaign. But I'm so lucky now to be part of the movement to pass paid leave in this country. And I often say I've had two missions in my career: to elect more women, particularly a woman president, and to pass paid leave. And it's no surprise to me that those two things may go hand in hand. Yes. But so when I look back, I'm not a person who gives a lot of career or like management advice. But the thing I do tell young people a lot is pretty common sense, which is just do good work and be nice to people. And I think that when I say that, I think often there's this worry about, is my work being seen? Do I have the exposure? Do I have the followers that I need? And I actually think if you just do really good work, people will notice it for its merits. And I think that more important than thinking about your contacts or your networks or your Facebook or your Instagram account, it's important you have relationships. I think every good opportunity I've had in my career has not been because of a transaction, it's been because of an authentic relationship. So, a little bit of advice, but I would love for you all to share your journeys too.
It's funny that you said this because I was flying in this morning and I was thinking, what advice do I have? I have no idea. And listening to your story, one of the biggest things that I realized is my career has not been linear. Apparently Dawn's career has not been linear either. And I was thinking, what are the two things that I feel like really made a difference in my career? One, I have made every decision with my heart, not my brain. And two, I took risks without overthinking them. And then the third is that it hasn't really been linear. I never thought I would run for office with 2 small babies. I didn't think I was going to launch an organization. I worked in international development. I studied politics and Russian. I worked on women's economic empowerment, started working at the United Nations Association, managed the merger with the UN Foundation, and always thought I would get a master's in international affairs. Watching ambassadors and really, really successful foreign policy experts fail in organization made me decide to go and get an MBA, which my mother laughed at. And I was the only person in my graduating class at Stern Business School who then decided to quit my job and stay home with my children. Everybody else was going into corporate America. At the time, I was a director of a research institute at NYU, and I was working with smallholder farmers in Ghana, and I loved my job. It was like the perfect, most dream job. I was on the ground with farmers, doing this incredible work to make a huge difference on economic development. And I was finishing my MBA, and I was pregnant with my first child, and I realized I had no paid family leave. Thank you to Dawn, who is doing this work, because I had no leave. I could not get off of any childcare wait list. I remember meeting a woman who knew that her boyfriend was about to propose. So she figured how long it would take for her to actually get married, have a baby, and go back to work. And she put her name on the wait list for 3 years down the road. At 6 months pregnant, I knew I was done and not getting off of that wait list. I quit my job. It was the hardest decision, second hardest decision I ever had to make, because I loved this work and I felt like that was it. My career was over and I was going to be mommy tracked. And I stayed in the city, finished my MBA, never thought I would move back to Long Island, which is where I grew up. But I moved back a year later because my mom is there and I wanted another baby and I wanted to somehow continue to work, and my mom was my childcare. She was my part-time childcare because she was still teaching then. And I was consulting. I would have my babies with me during the day. I was consulting in the evening when my mom got home, and somehow I was making it work. And then the election happened, and I had 2 tiny children and lost it. When we had the 2016 election, I could not function. Every day there was a new executive order, and I ended up organizing an indivisible group and starting to organize my district. Few months into that, everybody started to ask me if I would consider to run for Congress, and I said, I'm nursing 2 children. That's just crazy. But I ended up running for Congress. Literally the least planned decision I've ever made, and I did that. I made that decision with my heart. It was risky. I had never run for office before. I had no idea how to raise millions of dollars. I didn't come from a wealthy family. But I launched that campaign, and we came closer to unseating somebody who had been in office for nearly 30 years than anyone had. During the campaign, I put a request into the Federal Election Commission, and I asked if I could use some of the funds that I was raising for my campaign for childcare, and everyone said it was political suicide. Shockingly, it was a bipartisan, unanimous decision, and we've now, at Vote Mama, gotten that approved in 35 states for state and local candidates. Thank you. After the campaign, though, I cried for a full day, and everybody just didn't know what to do with me because I would literally didn't get out of bed for a day. And then the next day I was like, okay, I want to start a PAC. I'm going to start a PAC. We're going to support moms running for office. And then it turned into a foundation and a lobby, and we have been doing this work now for 5 years this year. And when Peter King retired, everybody thought I was going to run again, but I was pregnant with my 3rd child. Vote Mama was kicking ass. And I wanted to continue this work because I can do so much more with Vote Mama that I can do with one vote in Congress. And we have now supported moms running for office across the country, changed policy in 35 states. We just released our 5th research report today, Politics of Parenthood, looking at how many moms are serving in state legislatures, but I'll talk about that later. But the best advice, follow your heart, take the risks, and never worry about being mommy tracked. You can get off the track, you can get back on the track. There is no, it used to be kind of, in our parents' day, you got at one job and you stayed there and you worked your way up. You don't have to do that anymore. Get a job, do something you're super passionate about, find the next position, have people create positions for you because you know that you can make a difference, and have a hell of a lot of fun doing that. So that's my advice, and I will pass it to you.
Thank you both. My name is Jocelyn Yao, and I am a city council member in the city of Eastville in the state of California. I was chosen as the mayor of my city at the age of 25 and becoming the youngest woman of color to ever serve as a mayor in the state of California. And I share that, I want to start with that because unlike many of those who are in politics, who are in office, my journey to get there was very different. I did not grow up in a political family. In fact, my parents do not talk about politics. Growing up, they would always say, we don't talk about politics, we don't talk about religion. Those two things, we never talk about them. And for my parents, and especially for my mom, she was a refugee from Vietnam War, and so for her, when she thinks about politician, it's like they're corrupted. They're there to take things away from you, and so she always had this fear of politics and politicians. And so even in fact, when I told her I was like, I'm going to run for city council, she was like, are you sure about that? So it's very different how I got here. And how I got here to how I got a head start in my political journey, it was thanks to Ignite, which is where I work at right now. But it started when I was in college. So I went to a community college at the age of 17 in the Inland Empire in California. Anyone knows anything about the IE? Okay. So if you know anything about the IE, we don't have the metro system like y'all do here. There's no public transit. There's like maybe one bus line that runs every 45 minutes, if that, like maybe an hour. And I didn't have a car, 17 years old. I started college right after recession, which also meant that there were barely any classes, especially at a community college level. But I had a goal. I knew that I wanted to transfer out within 2.5 years, 3 years at most. And in order to do that, I actually went to, for my undergrad, I think I went to a total of 5 different colleges, just so that I could get the classes that I needed to transfer on time. What did that mean without a car? I had to rely on the bus. And so I would wake up every morning by 5 a.m., up and ready to go, and I would walk to, by the way, the closest bus station was an hour away. And so I would have to walk for an hour and then wait for the bus. And then you have to be there at least 15 minutes early because you cannot miss the bus. Anyone here relies on buses? Like once you miss it, you have to wait for the next one. And so I was waiting, and I got on the bus, and it would take 2.5 hours to get to a place that's only like 20 miles away. I did that for a semester, and it didn't really bother me. I was like, just doing what I had to do to graduate. And then it was pouring. I remember this one day. It was raining really hard. I was carrying my purple umbrella, and I was thinking to myself, why? Why do I have to do this? Why is this happening? And well, I had 2.5 hours on the bus. So I started Google searching, like, how are all these decisions being made? Who sits on, like, who decides, like, which bus route, where do the buses go to, how are colleges getting their funding? That was the first time in my life at the age of 17 when I learned that there's such thing called the Community College Board of Trustees. I learned about school board for the first time at the age of 17. I learned that even for transit, there's a board that oversees transit agencies. And that on that bus ride at the age of 17, I remember telling myself, I'm gonna transfer, and when I come back, I will run for office. And that was exactly what I did. I transferred, moved back home, ran for office at the age of 23, and I've been on city council ever since then. That is how I got to where I am today, which is very not typical. In fact, when I ran for office at the first, when I was 23 years old for the first time, a lot of people ask me questions like, how are you gonna raise money? Your family, even folks from my own party, someone asked me, your family is not in politics. How are you going to do this? And so it's not typical to see a 23-year-old to be running for office, and it's not typical to see a 23-year-old woman who had just graduated from college to be running for office. With that being said, I think it's important, absolutely important, that we have more women from all walks of lives to be running for office. And that's what we're doing at Ignite, is to build that pipeline to ensure that we have more women, women of color, women from marginalized communities, everyone. We want more women to be at the table. And in fact, just quick check-in, I always do this as a council member. Do you all know who your council members are? I see some. Great. Oh, this is amazing. Awesome. That makes me so happy. Because the media always focus on the presidential election, maybe Congress, maybe US senators. But did you know that there are over 500,000 seats across the country? 500,000. Let that sink in. That's a little bit over 500,000, a little bit over 500,000. And these elected officials, not just the president, because again, we all know who the president is, but it's not just about the president. There are so many other elected officials who make decisions that affect our daily lives. The water we drink, the air we breathe, the schools that we go to, the even workplace. You have elected officials addressing all those issues that directly affect our lives. And so, I do want to ask this question as we're thinking about, the next generation of leaders. How can we build a pipeline? How can we ensure that the work doesn't stop here, right? How can we bring all of them in? And I know Shreya sitting right in front of me, 17 years old, right? 16 years old. How can we bring all of them in, and how can we uplift them and ensure that that there's a political pipeline for those in case Shreya wants to run for office?
Can
Whoever.
I have to point something out. So I did not know this bus story, but this is, out of all of the moms that we've worked with through Vote Mama, everyone has a story similar to this. There's always one particular issue that encouraged people to run, and it always has to do something with their children. I love that this is your story prior to having children, but women want to run for office because they want to fix a problem. One of my favorite stories was a mom who her sidewalks were broken, and she was afraid to take her kids to school because there was traffic. And she asked her city council to come with her and walk with her children to school, and they did, and they still didn't fix the sidewalks. So she said, I'm done, I've asked, I've tried to get this done, I'm gonna run. She ran, and she now serves on city council. And everyone has one thing that just put them over the edge. Somebody's voting record, somebody who wouldn't respond to them, and they said, you know what, I can do this better. And we have this perspective, and maybe it's part of this pipeline, but we have this perspective that people who are in office are so smart, and they know what they're doing, and they have all this experience. And I ran against a guy who had been in office since I was 12. And I remember our very first debate, I threw up in the morning. I ate an entire package of Pepto-Bismol. I was terrified. Sorry to be gross. But my mom and my husband were in the front of the car, and I was in the back, just so nervous. And this man shows up with security guards, and they're all in black, and they look, like they know what they're doing. And the first time he opened his mouth to answer a question, all of a sudden I realized he didn't care. He didn't understand the issue, nor did he care. And that was the thing that really hit me the most. And I had fun in every debate that we had past that. But in terms of building the pipeline, it's getting people to realize that their electeds are not these godlike people who know everything. And if you understand the issues and you can talk to people about the issues and you can get to know your community, you can run for office. And then the other aspect of that is breaking down the barriers. And that's what we're trying to do, is break down the barriers, because there are very few people who know. Does anybody have an idea how much your state legislator gets paid? Okay, this is amazing. Raise your hand and tell me what the salary is. Just jump in. Tell me what your state.
At the state level?
Yes.
$17,000.
Where are you? Virginia? Rhode Island. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Assembly, 55,000 before per diem, 64%.
What state?
Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. So there are only, in your face right now, okay, so let me just tell you, there are only 4 states that pay a livable wage: Pennsylvania, Michigan, New York, and California. New Mexico state legislators get paid $0. In New Hampshire, get paid $200 for a 2-year session. Very few working people, and especially parents who are also trying to figure out how to cover childcare, cannot run for these seats and sustainably stay in office. So many amazing state legislators get into office and then actually resign and run for city council seats because they don't have to commute and they get paid an actual salary in many places,
I
not
will
in all.
say, I was like, I got paid $400 a month, by the way, which is why I have like 3 jobs. This is an issue. Like
It's a
there's
huge issue.
you know, that's why you don't see women or folks from marginalized communities running for office, and it's not uncommon, especially here. I see at the local level, it's usually white men who are retired, or they have small businesses that they own and they can just like, you know, have someone else deal with it while they run for office, or that they're realtors and have to, it's basically people.
Or lobbyists.
Or lobbyists, people who have the flexibility to do so, and that's definitely not moms.
Or independently wealthy people.
Exactly,
That's
who have
who
trust
runs.
funds whom they can rely on, and that's usually not people of color or women of color. And so absolutely, yeah, no, you brought up a really good point about pay. We need to pay our legislators a living wage, absolutely.
I was just going to add, I kept thinking of things as you were talking. Patty Murray, wasn't it a stop sign she was trying? It was, yeah, there's always these stories like this that are great. Like one thing they wanted to fix that inspired them to go on. But I think in addition to like trying to get over these structural barriers that we're talking about, I also think creating, in the meantime, creating networks. So when I mentioned People for the American Way, part of my work was something called the Young Elected Officials Network, which was started by young elected officials. And I think this kind of goes back to what I said about creating real relationships and not just contacts, because in the original class, I mean, it was everyone from, however we feel about her, Kirsten Sinema, to the Castro brothers, to people who are now in cabinet, now people who are governors, people who are in the Senate and Congress. And they've maintained a lot of those friendships over the years. And I saw this, I'm friends with Ayanna Pressley. I was there in our friend's apartment for a fundraiser for her the night that she met AOC. And AOC came to the fundraiser, she gave her the floor to speak, and they became friends and decided we're gonna help each other throughout this campaign. We're gonna loan each other staff, we're gonna show up and do field for each other. And similar to kind of, you came so close, but like they both took on these really entrenched incumbents with war chests. So I do think that not only are we proving again and again and again that untraditional candidates can win, especially when they are truly authentic and showing up as themselves. But also when we don't have these same sort of access to privilege and sort of the old boys clubs, we can form new networks that are built in that same authenticity and supporting each other and believing in each other for the right reasons. And that's something that really gives me hope, is I think that whole dynamic is changing. And it's changing the nature of power, and it will have ripple effects in all kinds of ways. But I also think, to talk about building the pipeline, more people just need to share the stage. I think that more people need to retire. I think more people need to pass the baton. So we'll try to work at both angles.
To both your points in terms of building the pipeline and what can we do, what are the biggest difficulties that you have experienced running? I'm happy to talk about some of the difficulties that our candidates that we're actually working to break down, but some of the difficulties that you have just being a mom and being a founding director, being a mom and being a city council member and having 3 jobs. How are you handling that?
Where do I begin? I've been on council for 6 years now. Before I had a kid, and now I have a 4-year-old. The challenges are different, but still challenging. In fact, more challenging now that I have a kid. Balancing childcare, that has got to be the hardest thing. Sometimes I have no idea how to do it. People would ask me, how do you do it all? Like, how do you balance everything? I really don't have an answer. Like, that's the truth. I have no idea. I just keep telling myself one day at a time, and when I cannot even do that, I'll tell myself 1 hour at a time, or one afternoon at a time, just, one day at a time. But I will say, been able to access childcare, using excess campaign funds for childcare, that is life-changing. That is absolutely life-changing. When I ran for office again for re-election in 2022, I had access to childcare, access to campaign funds for childcare. And that was great. That really changed a whole lot of things. I was able to go door knocking, even when, you know, my little one might not be feeling well. I try to bring him out with me, but not always. And I was able to use my campaign funds for that. With that being said, one of the challenges that I also encountered during this experience is that, well, you need to have money in your campaign funds to be able to pay for childcare. And statistically speaking, candidates they tend to get more donations than women. And so, you know, until we address, I think there's a whole layers of issues here, and until we can address all of that, there's still so much work to be done. But that definitely helped. I have a friend, so when I first ran in 2018, we did not have access to campaign funds for childcare yet at that time. A friend of mine, she has 3 kids, and that year in 2018, she racked up $15,000 in credit card debt just on childcare between 3 kids. And so I'm so grateful. You have no idea. Like, even I've been following your work for years, even when you first ran for Congress, and now the work that you do. It's life-changing for a lot of moms, or not even, you know, for young people, for young adults who are thinking of starting a family. You know, being able to take that into consideration as they plan for their 5-year plan or whatnot, that helps a lot. And so kudos to you for taking the lead on that.
I appreciate that. Thank you for using it, because it helps to normalize it. And that's honestly one of the biggest fears, is that so many candidates don't, even if they're able to, they don't, because they think they're going to be politically attacked. But we've actually seen at the state level a 2,156% increase in usage from 2018 to 2022. The more we talk about it, the more we normalize it, the more people use it. So there's now been more than $1 million of campaign funds spent on childcare. And it seems like a very small structural change, but it can completely transform the political landscape and who even gets to think about running.
Yeah. I remember when it happened. I was so proud of you too. But I just want to say, aside from people who are, you know, heads of organizations or in office, I mean, who here feels stressed about balancing their family and their work? Shocked. And I just want to remind, I think everyone here knows this because you're here for a reason, that this is no personal failing, and that this is the failing of a country. And that in the wealthiest country in the world, care is inaccessible and unaffordable. We're one of the only countries in the world that doesn't have paid family and medical leave nationally. You know, I'm sure you've heard these statistics that childcare there, half the population lives in a childcare desert where even if you could afford it, you can't find it. So I think the truth is, when we talk about how do some people find balance, you're either tremendously privileged and lucky, or you have just like a wildly supportive personal network and family. I've only been able to find any semblance of balance because I have a supportive family. You know, I have parents who could move in. I have so many resources in that sense. But I also think something I'm trying to remember is, as I move up in my career, is to try to change it. At least, you know, when I first was pregnant, I didn't talk about it at work. You know, I didn't bring my baby, and I didn't have pictures of him. And for a reason. People do that for a reason, because I felt the impacts of it at work. But now that I'm in a position where I can a bit call the shots, I try to bring my family along with me. And I try to make my son feel a part of it when it's appropriate to have him with me. I take him to events. He's often my date. He is paid leave's biggest fan besides me. And so that makes it easier, at least in our lives, that he feels so invested in it and in the work himself, that I think he understands when I'm gone, and he gives me a lot of grace about it. So I think when you have the privilege to be able to try to change things in your own life, in your own workplace, I think it's really important. We try to do what we can there as well.
Did you say your parents moved in with you?
When I had my baby, yeah.
Okay, so this is the network. My mom lives with us, and she's the only reason I was able to run for Congress, and she's the only reason I'm able to be here today, because she took my baby to preschool today. She's picking all 3 of my kids up at school today. You know, J.D. Vance made that ridiculous comment about women who are postmenopausal are supposed to be there to take care of the babies. Most people don't have that privilege. It is such a, there's like, you talk about, you know, generational wealth, having a grandparent who has the ability to stay home and take care of your babies, who isn't still working, isn't still paying for school loans themselves, because we know we have many senior people in this country doing that. It's the reason that so many people are able to succeed. Professor Jessica Clarko, who just released a book called Holding It Together, it's my favorite quote, and I have said this a million times. We're actually doing a book launch. Julie's organization, the Century Foundation, and Vote Mama is having an event with Jessica for our report launch and her book launch. You have to read it. But she said this quote, that other countries have social safety nets and the US has women. I have never heard more truth said in one sentence, because we have become the social safety nets. And the reason that is, it's a country issue. It's a policy failure. These are not the individual failures of people. It's the failures of our policies. And the reason that we have such terrible policies, guns are the leading cause of death for American children. Childcare, exactly to what Dawn just said, more than half of us live in a childcare desert. College is cheaper than childcare in many states, and we're one of, 2 countries in the world without paid family leave? These are policy failures because we're missing a very specific experience, lived experience at the decision-making tables. Our report that we released today, are you ready for this? Out of 7,386 state legislators, guess how many are moms of minor children? Anybody yell out a number? What do you think? 10%. Less than that. Only 582 moms, which shockingly, are you ready for this? This is even crazier. It's 7.9%, which sounds like a very low number. It's a 49% increase since our research in 2022. 49% increase. So while this number is abysmal, we're actually seeing growth, and it's because we're starting to now break down some of these structural issues. Salary is one of them. Paid family leave for state legislators. Technically, as a state legislator, you can take leave when you have a baby, but you can no longer participate in committee hearings. You can't vote. So now you're putting yourself at political risk of losing your job. If we actually had things like paid family leave so that we normalized what it looked like to take this time off, to then have virtual voting, proxy voting, you would have more parents of young children run for office, more moms in particular, having on-site childcare. Everyone knows how hard it is to find childcare in one location. Now you have to find it at home and at the Capitol, and you have to have flexible childcare because your voting schedule is all over the place. So imagine how much easier it would be if you had on-site childcare reimbursements, all of these structural things, because our political system, especially at the state legislative level, was designed for wealthy, white, land-owning men to run and serve and make decisions. 19,000 bills were passed by state legislatures last cycle. 19,000. State legislatures are passing bills that affect every aspect of our lives, and yet less than 8% of our state legislators are moms of minor kids. We need to break all of those structural barriers, because if you want to change our policies, you have to change our policymakers. And if you want to change the policymakers, you have to change the political system. And that is how you're actually going to start to see things like passing paid family leave.
I just realized we so smoothly transitioned into the next topic.
I don't even know what the next topic was supposed to be.
We were supposed to be talking about policy and organizing strategies, so
go.
we just organically got there. Yes, thank you. And I was just going to say a word about paid leave, because I mentioned I'm the head of this campaign. We almost passed paid leave federally in 2021. We were within one vote. And if we had this program in place, we wouldn't all be at the mercy of our employers. We wouldn't have to figure this out on our own. So in terms of organizing strategies, I just had to make the plug for all of you to get involved in this fight for paid leave and for care, child care, and that also includes aging and disability care. When we talk about J.D. Vance and grandma, like one day we're going to be caring for grandma as well. And more of us caring for both kids and our parents at the same time, and all kinds of family members and loved ones. So all of this we're on the cusp of it. Again, we nearly got it done. And if we have the votes in 2025, as you heard from Sarah McBride today, it should be, and by God it will be, at the top of the agenda. But it will take the voters who care about this, women, allies, all of us, putting that pressure on and making sure that it stays at the top of the agenda. So I would just urge you, at kind of a personal plug, to follow Paid Leave for All, follow our partners, follow IWPR and all of your organizations as well, because I hope they engage to make sure that we get these policies passed.
And in fact, since we brought up paid family leave and talking about organizing, we always think about presidential election, federal level. Do you know what your state policies are when it comes to Family Leave Act? What do y'all have? Nothing. Okay, which state was it? Wisconsin. Anyone else?
Temporary caregiver insurance in Rhode Island.
That's it? That's the only thing you want?
It's paid leave up to 8 weeks.
Okay. And 100% pay leave or? Okay.
75%.
Gotcha. Okay. Anyone else know about your state policy?
Vicki,
So-
do you want to just recite it all?
So the reason why I brought this up, it's because, yes, again, we talk about federal election and pay family leave at the national level, which is absolutely crucial. But what about the states? What about your local officials, right? Yes, it might be harder to get a bill passed at the Congress level, but guess what? What about the state level? If there's one thing that you should be doing after this, don't even wait until you leave Chicago. Right after this, send an email, call your state legislators, tell them that you need to have paid family leave in your state. Go knock on their doors if you have to, and remember this, they work for you. It's not the other way around. They work for you, right? And so keep talking about it, whether it's at local level, state level, or federal level. And here in the city of Eastville, I will share my own example. The city of Eastville, so in the state of California, we have paid family leave, we do, but it's only like around 65%, 60 to 70%.
But it's gonna get better.
It will get better. It will get better. Yes.
I knew
Yes.
Vicki had to go.
We'll get there. Well, we're getting there. But what does that mean when we talk about only 60 to 70% of the pay? It means women of color or people who, a lot of women, a lot of parents cannot afford to take only 60 to 70% of their pay, myself included. I actually took only, I think, 4 weeks off because I couldn't afford losing that portion of my paycheck. This is the one time in your life where your expenses are increasing. It's not decreasing. Why would you decrease someone's pay when their expenses are increasing? And so I took 4 weeks, and only 4 weeks. I didn't even take the whole 6 weeks. And so now that I'm on city council, one of the policies that I introduced and was passed just this year, is 100% pay parental leave. So here in the city of Eastville, folks have access to 100% pay parental leave for 12 weeks. And so it's examples like this, yes, we do want a federal pay family leave act. At the same time, as we're thinking of strategies to organize and how can we get there, we can also start at the local level and the state level and make changes. Instead of just top down, we can also make changes bottoms up. So
I was going to say there are really cool examples of that. Everything from the public employees you talked about to school boards to teachers, everything from Tennessee to Texas to Cleveland. I mean, the paid leave progress at the local level and state level is really remarkable. The reason we fight for it federally is there are places that will never do it though. And so then we're going to continue to have more inequity in this country. There'll be the states, the haves and the have-nots. So that's the reason for the federal fight. But there's really cool stuff happening locally. Yeah.
Can I ask a question? How many of you are moms? How many of you are parents?
Parents.
Dads, moms. How many of you actually had any sort of paid family leave? Okay. It's actually more than I would have expected. I think the fact that you're talking about it is the best thing that we can do in terms of organizing. Every time I talked about paid family leave or childcare when I ran for Congress, every single time someone would say, they'd pull me aside afterwards or they'd raise their hand, you should stop talking about the women's issues and you should stick to the bread and butter issues. I got that piece of advice over and over and over again, and it drove me nuts because of the lack of childcare in this country, we lose $120 billion a year in economic activity. If we had similar labor force participation rates to countries like Canada or Germany that have childcare and paid family leave and flexible work options, you'd add 5.5 million women to the workplace, $500 billion a year to the economy. Childcare and paid leave are the most basic bread and butter issues this country faces, and for too long, our elected officials have convinced us that they're women's issues. They're not. They're economic issues, and the more that we talk about them as economic issues, the more that people start to take them seriously and actually understand why they matter. So that is, in terms of organizing, that's my biggest advice. Talk about it and make sure people know damn well that it is not a women's issue and that it matters. If we want a strong economy, we need to pass paid family leave. If we want a strong economy, we need childcare, because women cannot be the social safety net. This is not working. We have the Surgeon General just put out a report saying that there's a mental health crisis right now for parents because we're all stressed, because no one has any sort of safety net, and everybody is working around the clock to make ends meet and trying to figure out how to pay for everything, because childcare is expensive, diapers are expensive, not having paid family leave is expensive, and it has to change. And the only way it will change is the more that we talk about it in real terms of what it really matters and elect people who will do the same. And in terms of calling your representatives, in some states, if you Google your state representative, you literally will get their cell phone number. Because in many of those states, they don't have staff because there's no budget for staff. So you can call in New Hampshire, if you Google somebody, you'll get the state legislator's cell phone number. Call and talk to them and tell them that these issues matter to you. And if you get their staff, talk to their staff, because they actually really do care. And if they have the support of knowing that people in their community care about these issues, they are more apt to fight for them.
Wait, Q&A?
Yes, Q&A sounds good. Do we have a microphone, or can people just raise their hands and ask questions? Okay. Thank you.
Hi. First off, this is like one of the best panels I've ever seen before. Thank you so much for your responses to the questions and answers. I think partially because it resonates a lot with the issues that I face in my day-to-day life. Hi, everyone. My name is Shirley, pronouns as she, her, currently a 16-year-old based in Solano County, California, doing a lot of reproductive health work, and also elected official as student trustee at my community college. And
At the age of 16.
Thank you. And so my question is, so we actually just almost passed, it's on the governor's desk right now, state legislation for comprehensive menstrual education in all California schools. And we did
Sorry,
that.
did you say menstrual?
Menstrual
Okay.
education in all California schools, and we did that through grassroots efforts. However, what we see oftentimes with a lot of policies that are passed is implementation is not successful. And so I'm curious, you guys all doing this work, doing research and things of that nature, when you see a really implementable policy passed, how do you work to make that implemented in a way that actually sees that dramatic change, actually sees the policy be implemented in a way that helps that community, rather than just being seen as something face value and just as something written on a piece of paper?
I'm sorry, you're 16 and you're a school board member? That's amazing. First of all, can we just stop there for a second? When did you get elected? How old were you when you got elected?
I got elected my freshman year of high school.
I love you.
I was gonna say, I've heard of college. I think you might be the youngest elected I've ever heard
Ignite
of.
member, by the way. Yeah, she's been with us for a while now, but so proud of her. And yes, she has accomplished a lot at 16 years old. Yes.
That is amazing. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm in shock. So you got elected at 15. You already know how to community organize. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this, but getting something like that passed, it's a critical policy. Getting it implemented and making sure it's community organizing, in my thought, is the more people talk about it, the more people will actually do something about it. You're a school board member, making sure that your school board understands this policy and making sure it's implemented at your school, making sure that other school board members know about it, making sure that you're having conference calls with school board members from across the state saying this was just passed, let's make sure it's implemented in your school district.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So having that, well, first of all, thank you for all that you do. And I don't know if you caught that, but she wrote that bill.
You did not say that. That is even more amazing. I want to talk to you after this, but go ahead, continue.
She wrote a bill at the age of 16 and got it passed in the state of California and is now at the governor's desk. Let me repeat that. Like, that's. I feel like you should be teaching us about organizing. But yes, I definitely, what was mentioned, talk to education piece, talk to other school board members, making sure that everyone is aware of it. And then also, tying back to using campaign funds for childcare, because same thing, it was a policy that passed and some folks might not even know that that's available to them. One of the things that I started doing, and I would often encourage other moms, other parents in my circle do, is that when we host a fundraiser, I have no shame in saying, please donate $15 because that is 1 hour of childcare for me. And
Love that.
yeah, so because people sometimes will say, oh, I need $15 for yard signs, and so I was like, you know what, I need $15 for childcare, and so being just educating folks about it and changing the culture, keep talking about it and doing what you have been doing. Like honestly, you're totally fine. What you've been doing, it's perfect, and that's how you're gonna get all these policies implemented.
But also, you were talking about money. I'd say that too. That if you can get funds allocated for the implementation, for the outreach, community engagement, and all that, it's important.
I'm gonna put you in touch with a whole bunch of our California people who have big Instagram followings, and you're gonna do an Insta Live and talk about your legislation and get people to pay attention to it that way. That's amazing.
Problem solved.
There you go. I'm so excited.
All right, we can leave now. Any other problems?
Thank you. Hello, my name is Aureli, pronouns they, she, and I live in Womp Womp, Florida. So all these policies that you're talking about, which are incredible, which seem like common sense legislation in the state of Florida, are not common sense. They're deemed woke and DEI and all of the stuff that is very difficult to pass. I work in policy, so I'm actually in the Capitol working with legislators trying to get policy passed. So my question comes from, and obviously it is in a way of like message and rhetoric, but what like tips and advice do you have about working with legislators to kind of make them see, because like the people of Florida obviously care about these issues, but the legislators that are in there, they don't care about those issues. So how do we kind of navigate those, those stubborn people who can't really see the fact that these are policies that actually working Floridians want, and how we can like move that forward, because it is very difficult to pass like quote unquote progressive policies in like a very regressive state.
I would say data and stories. There's polling, I can give it to you, that shows that these are some of the most bipartisan, widely supported, popular issues in the country. It's something that both motivates what we say progressive base voters. Supermajorities of Republicans support these issues, and then they're very motivating and persuasive to independent and swing voters. So anyone who cares about getting elected should be paying attention to that. Also, I think it's the stories, and to your point, it's bringing in sometimes the less sort of likely stories. I did a talk recently in Cleveland, where I'm from, and I made sure that the people in that room were not just the moms, the nurses, that we had a whole table of firefighters, that we have brought in all different kinds of people who care about these issues, and that's the true story. We don't hear that enough, but a lot of people do care about it. So if you can find, who you think about, if you're looking at a particular office you need to move, who do they care about? What constituents can they relate to? Do they need to win over? I think that's really important too. And
adding to that, there's this saying here at Ignite, whenever we do advocacy work, we're like, power in numbers, right? And so build a diverse coalition, bring in folks like the firefighters, and just expanding that coalition. But also, well, first of all, credit to all that you do. It is, I can only imagine how difficult it is. So at Ignite, where I work at, one of the bills that we have been working on is to eliminate the tampon tax. And in the state of Texas, anyone from the state of Texas? No? Well, we started working on that bill in 2016. It took us 6 years, more than 6 years, but we finally got it passed in the state of Texas. So now when you shop in the state of Texas for menstrual products, you do not have to pay additional tax for that. So it can be done. But it was very challenging. Yeah. Absolutely, to your point, very challenging. It took many stories, many organizations coming together, and they were only, and in the state of Texas, they're only in session every 2 years. And so once that time comes, we just bring busloads of young women and folks, students, everyone to the Capitol in Austin, and have them testify, share their stories, and that was what I would like to think moved the needles. So, but but again, kudos to you for all that you do. I know how difficult it can be, so thank you.
Thank you. And something similar that happened was that we had something called the Learning with Dignity Act, which was to put menstrual products for free in schools. And we got it passed finally, like years later, but it was so watered down where it's like, that's like something that we also face where it's like we get these good progressive policies passed, but they're not at all what they were at the beginning. And it's just, so I really appreciate your comments, all of you.
In terms of campaign funds for childcare, shockingly, we've actually, we cannot get it passed in Massachusetts. We've tried 3 times, but we got it passed in Oklahoma and Arizona just last week. We've gotten it approved in Arkansas, very red states. When we're talking to Republican legislators, we're talking more about this is a policy, this is a change that you can institute in your state that will make it easier for young families to run for office. It's just like that slight change in the way that we talk about it, getting more moms into office versus young families into office. There's also this, and it comes to it's different for paid family leave and for childcare because that's something that we're putting tax dollars behind. When it comes to campaign funds for childcare, the perspective is that's money that you're raising on your campaign, so you can choose how to spend it. So there's more of a libertarian concept behind it. But all of the state-led modernization work that we want to do past that, it's really making sure that we have more people who are representative of the rest of society in office. Both Republicans and Democrats tend to understand that. So we've had a little bit more luck when having those conversations, especially on a bipartisan level, because they understand the need to have more young people in office. But it's hard. It's the stories and the data. I'm going to ask you a question, actually. What percentage of the population actually supports paid family leave?
85.
Wow. And that includes men.
This was actually, we most recently did this in battleground states. These battleground states.
And it's Republicans and Democrats.
That's overall, all of the overall number. I think it was 76% of Republicans in battleground states. So yeah, it's overwhelmingly popular. It's at record highs. We've seen this. We did sampling for everything from Gen Z voters to suburban moms to you name it. These are some of the most popular issues in the country. So we need to make sure that translate to the people that represent us. Yeah.
Well, before I give up the mic, I do want to note that there was a bill for campaign finance that was bipartisan that died in Florida.
We're working on it. We have a plan for next cycle.
I'm actually really close with the sponsor, Representative Skidmore, so if there's anything that I can do to help, let me know.
Let's chat.
Look, another problem solved. Okay.
There you go.
Hi, I'll just stand. Hi, my name is Star Dos Santos. I'm the Associate Director at Women Employed, Chicago-based. And, I think lately, or for a while, people are like, hey, you ever thought about running for office? And I'm like, hell no. But most recently, that kind of has changed. And, I think one of my hesitations really is, I need to understand the process a little bit. And so I guess my question for you is, what was the hardest part of, the process? Was it the raising the money? And so, how did you go about that? I also know, there's, a lot of paperwork. It's just a long process that makes it a little bit more tedious. So, what was the hardest part for you, and how did you navigate that?
Is there a merge here, by the way?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, so there's, yes, the process is indeed very complicated, and I am convinced that they did it on purpose to keep people like us out of office. So yes, Dawn mentioned there's Emerge. So Emerge is this training meant for Democratic women that helps just explaining the whole process and help you prepare to run for office. Ignite, what we do is we also help young women and non-binary folks, specifically in high school and college age and recent graduates, to run for office, and it is nonpartisan. There's so many other organizations run for something. What else? I'm trying to think of all the organizations. There are a lot.
We'll send you a list.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Yeah, we need a list.
What are you thinking of running for?
I really don't know. So currently, I'm a council member for the LGBTQ Advisory Council for the city. So that I think that's one step in. I'm really not sure. I'm kind of just really enjoying the ride and kind of seeing where that goes. I would like to have a national presence, but I'm kind of open to that.
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Also, did you have someone help advise you on all that stuff, the process?
No. So, okay, the hardest part is the starting. I love talking to people. That's what I wanted to do, is I wanted to talk policy and just knock on doors and talk to voters. I almost quit so many times in the first 6 weeks because it was hell. You have no idea. If you've never done it before and you're not politically connected, you have no idea. I didn't know what to do, and I had nobody helping me. And I remember I had one friend who was one of the founders of Arena PAC, and they put me in touch with another friend, and they're like, okay, this guy can kind of help you out part-time. And I had to fill out all this paperwork. I called the attorneys. Like, I went through all. It is so tedious in the beginning, and it makes you want to quit. But once you get past that, then it becomes so much fun. And then it's just talking to voters and raising money. And if you hate raising money, it's very difficult to run for office. You have to actually enjoy both talking to voters and raising money because you need to do both. But once you get past that initial stage, and there are organizations that can help you, but frankly, it's going to the lawyers, it's figuring out who all your consultants that you're going to hire. Don't hire a bunch of consultants. That's the best advice. Hire one really good person in the beginning who can help you do all of that stuff, and then just start raising money and knocking on doors and talking to people and getting out there in your community, and the rest kind of flows. I don't even know how to say that, but once you get to the fun part, you'll be good.
Thank you. I know we have 4 minutes left, so should we do one more question and close it?
One more question.
I just wanted to add on to that real quick. First of all, my name is Heather Heyer. I'm the director of the Office on the Economic Status of Women at the Minnesota Legislative Coordinating Commission, which is a lot of words. And I apologize for that. But I'm also a recovering election administrator. So I used to run elections.
Ooh.
So let me just tell you, you don't have to know the process. Just do it. Become friends with your clerk. Your clerk is going to tell you what paperwork you need to fill out so you can get the job done. I've also worked for several municipalities, and let me tell you, no offense, city councilors have no clue what they're doing. They have no idea. Finally, I just want to leave with this. St. Paul has an all-female city council, and it's remarkable.
Yes.
7 women, thank you, and all but one woman of color. And most of them got involved at the local board level. So to our 16-year-old, also thank you. You're already doing it. You know half the work already. So that's incredible, do it. And that is a great pipeline to get into office or to have women in leadership positions. Do your local boards. Check out what you have in your city, in your county, at your state level. We're always looking for board members, and it doesn't sound sexy, and it helps if your community pays per diem as well, speaking of parents. But that is a great way to get involved and be active and have our voices at the table. So thank you.
And I just want to say no, none taken. It's absolutely. I feel like sometimes I'm on the council and I look at my colleagues. I'm like, do they even know what they're talking about? But and that's exactly why we need all of you to run for office, right? It's not. They're not any smarter. We're not any smarter than any of you. It's truly just run for office. And I know we have one last question. We'll take one last question.
Yeah, a little more of a comment. Thank you so much. And everyone's questions and conversation are awesome. My name's Liana Kassar. I am a former state representative in Rhode Island, very politically involved, running for a town council seat right now. It's a whole long story. But I run a program for women in state legislatures called OASIS. It's part of Family Values at Work. And one thing I want to say is, go help someone running for office. You will get the best education by helping someone, and all of us who run for office need help. You could canvass for a weekend. Canvassing, I'm an introvert. I used to hate it. This weekend I canvassed with the folks who were running with me. We had a fabulous time. So when you do any of it in community, it's great. And what I will say is, we actually do know more, usually, than our male counterparts, no offense. But if you look at the women who are elected to state legislatures, on average, they raise the educational level in the room every time. They just aren't given the power. They aren't permitted the power. So we are more creative about how we use our power, usually, because we come from communities that have traditionally not had power. So we play the game differently, but we need to be in the game, however you can be in the game. Candidates need people to staff. Candidates need people to help them raise money. A student intern who helped me during my first campaign, she sat with me while I made my fundraising calls. She ended up working for Grechen and she now works in DC. Like, there's a path. There's a lot of careers to being in this, and we need everybody everywhere. So just jump in however you can.
And I'll leave everyone with this, which was mentioned. Your lived experience matters, and you know your schools best, you know your community best, you know your city best, and there's no better person to run for office than you. And so as you leave here, I want you to turn to the person next to you and tell them, you should run for office.
You should run for office.
Actually, you should probably. Do you think about it?
Thank you, everyone.